Welcome back to an introduction to recovery residences. In this video, we're going to talk about the role of recovery residences within a spectrum of support. Recovery residences play an important role within a recovery-oriented system of care, interfacing with homeless services, veteran services, criminal justice, education, and most often with mental health and substance use services. And this is all across a continuum of care. Looking across the United States, the National Alliance for Recovery Residences identified four general types known as levels of support. The levels will be discussed in greater detail in another lesson, but here they're plotted on this graph to illustrate where they fit within a full spectrum of support. On the far right, you will find the highest level of services within a continuum of care. We're talking about hospitalization, detox, inpatient addiction treatment, and other acute care services. The goal of these short duration, high intensity services is to stabilize individuals who are in crisis or who have had an exacerbation of their symptoms. On the far left, you'll find the lowest level of service intensity. This is where residents live for extended period of times in order to gain the support that they need to live independent and meaningful lives in the community, as opposed to living in controlled institutional settings. So note that recovery is a nonlinear process, and access to various levels of support should not be linear either. Even if there is every level of support in a particular community, the objective is not to step down from 4 to 3 to 2 to 1. The true objective is to match an individual's needs over time. Let's take a look at some case studies to kind of express that point. So, for example, we have Tom and we have Elizabeth. They're both in detox at the same time. Tom discharges to a level 4 recovery residence in a local community, but then chooses to move to a level 2 across the state in order to be closer to some supportive friends. On the other hand, Elizabeth discharges to a local level 3 and became a resident leader, and now she teaches their life skill classes. Each chose and were matched with the level of support that they needed to support their individual recovery goals. Let's take this example a little further. So Tom unfortunately gets hit by a car as he was biking to his new job. The trauma resulted in him returning to use and an overdose. Luckily, his housemates were trained on how to administer naloxone, and Tom was safely stabilized in Suboxone. Today, Tom lives in a level 3 recovery residence that specializes in supporting individuals on medication-assisted treatment. Now let's take a look at Elizabeth. After serving as recovery house manager for the level 3 recovery residence, Elizabeth decides to move to a level 1 while still carrying out her responsibilities as the life skills trainer at the level 3. The move gave Elizabeth more autonomy, a goal that she had on her recovery plan, but without losing the peer-to-peer support amongst housemates that she has really come to rely on and treasure. In all of these scenarios, both Tom and Elizabeth were linked and chose the support that they needed at a particular point in time and in support of their own recovery goals. So there's always this question, what level of support is right for whom? And I think it's important to realize that one size doesn't fit all. We always have to ask ourselves, is a recovery residence a good fit? And then looking at how do we link individuals with the right level. So here are a couple of things that you may want to take a look at. In another video, we talked about recovery capital. And so if you want to assess someone's recovery capital, an individual with a lower level of recovery capital more likely needs a higher level of support. And reverse, if someone comes in with a lot of recovery capital, then they probably need a lower level of support. I think it's also important to take a look at disease severity and disease complexity. Does somebody have a really severe instance of substance use issue, and do they have, co-occurring mental health conditions or intensive trauma in their background? The higher the severity and the greater complexity, the more likely they will need a higher level of support, and the less than the lower level of support. You should also take a look at their stages of development, meaning where are they in their life cycle, stages of change, and stages of recovery. Adolescents would tend to need higher level of support. Individuals in that transition age youth age range, that's between, say, 16 and 26, their brains are not fully developed, and oftentimes they need a higher level of support versus someone who is an adult with a lot of life experience. We often talked about stages of change. How ready is someone in their stages of change to make that change? And inversely to stages of change, you can take a look at where they at in their recovery process. If they're further along in their recovery process, they likely need a lower level of support. Versus if they're early in their process, they may need a higher level of support. And of course, ideally, we keep driving this point home: person driven, person driven. It should always be about choice. But the harsh reality is that most individuals are calling recovery residences asking, do you have a bed and how much is it? That's how people are making decisions around which recovery residence to choose. So it's our job to make sure that we have the full spectrum of recovery residences available to them and really assess, so what are their needs, and matching them with the appropriate level of support. It's good for them, and it's also most cost effective. So that wraps up this particular video. I hope you learned something and that you will join us for the rest of the series.